For the last 3 months, I had been working at an assisted living community, which, by the way, some call it the best kept secret in the city. Why, do you ask? Well, that'll become apparent as the story progresses. So continuing, during the first 2 months, I had heard pieces of conversations from the residents regarding another resident who goes by the name of Miss Gray. She is one of the residents in the unit that we call the quiet unit. We call it that because it's literally a unit that's eerily quiet at all hours of the day. As for the conversations, I naturally get to overhear people talking while serving food and as well as when I'm doing the dishes. I couldn't exactly make full sense of the things I had heard up to that point, but it was mostly about skin colors, snakes, and video game characters. With that being said, this one day, I was washing dishes from breakfast. Earlier in the day, I had witnessed some odd behaviors from a couple of supervisors, but despite that, I felt okay and comfortable for the most part. After I was done with the dishes, I was ordered to deliver a cart of food and drinks to the quiet unit. I thought it was weird since I normally deliver dinner, but orders are orders, and thus I proceeded to make the delivery. I arrived at the quiet unit and proceeded to enter into Miss Gray's apartment. I was walking slowly toward the table when I saw Miss Gray walking toward me. I stopped in my tracks because Miss Gray was approaching me really fast and she looked furious for some reason. As she walked toward me with that angry face, she asked, "Why are you here?" I smiled and politely answered, "I'm delivering food. Come to the table and eat." However, even before I was able to finish the sentence, she interrupted, "I'm gonna eat you instead." I stayed calm and politely repeated that I was there to deliver her food, but Miss Gray interrupted me again. Thankfully, a CNA, that's basically a nursing assistant, well, she overheard the complaint and came into the apartment to offer assistance. While Miss Gray continued protesting, the CNA stood next to me and said, "She'll change like that right in front of your eyes, but don't let her intimidate you, because otherwise she'll bite." I didn't really understand what the CNA was trying to tell me. Regardless, I had to somehow defuse the situation. I apologized to Miss Gray and added, "Perhaps some food will make you feel better." To that which she responded with some gibberish that I couldn't understand. While she was talking, I saw a glimpse of some disturbing physical changes happening inside her mouth. When she stopped her gibberish, she opened her mouth wide like a lion about to pounce on a feeble prey. That's when I saw it clearly. Her teeth looked to be shifting, and at the same time, they became sharper. It reminded me of the Van Helsing ballroom scene. With that, I had concluded what she might be and why her unit is called the Quiet Unit. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that she's a vampire, but she's not like the rest of us. That I can tell you for sure. The stories that I heard about her and their unit, they were actually all real. These people, assuming they are people, they're not normal. That being said, the CNA guided Miss Gray back toward the living room. She told her that someone else would come by to help her with her needs. As for me, I showed myself out of the apartment, then continued the food delivery. The CNA caught up with me a short time thereafter. She wanted to check that I was okay, and I told her that I was fine. She left afterwards, and I as well exited the unit soon after. I arrived back at the kitchen, and somehow every one of my coworkers knew all the details of the incident in the Quiet Unit. As it turns out, word travels fast around here. The first question among the many was asked by one of the cooks. He simply asked, "How was it?" And I responded, "Miss Gray is exactly as people here have described." Initially, I couldn't really make sense of what you folks were saying about her, but after the things I had witnessed today, I know exactly what you were saying, and they all make sense now. I guess you folks were speaking the truth. I went to wash the dishes after that, but I was continually bombarded with questions throughout. I did answer their questions, but kept the response concise. I figured every single one of my coworkers had worked there for longer than I had. Thus, they must know everything that there is to know. There was no need for me to add the details. After that experience, whenever I had to go make food deliveries, I had always wondered if there were more people like Miss Gray in the quiet unit. Well, I didn't get to see other residents in the unit, but I did have the displeasure of seeing Miss Gray again sometime thereafter. The encounter was a little different the second time around. I saw her face change in a bizarre manner, and their skin, they looked as though they were infected, as if they would slide off the meat if you just brushed your hand against them. Let's just say that Miss Gray needed little effort to be Halloween ready. I had managed to continue working there without further incident. I did, however, quit at the end of the year, and that was the end of that place for me. Growing up, I had heard a story or two about old people being evil. Well, let me tell you, Miss Gray took those stories to a whole new level for me. I work as a real estate agent, and thus my job entails showing different homes and meeting many different people on a daily basis. The other day, I was scheduled to show 2 exceptionally beautiful homes in Elk Grove, which, by the way, one of the listings, it looked very familiar to me for some reason. That being said, I was having difficulties walking on that day. I hurt my ankle earlier in the week, and it was still very painful to walk on. I think you can safely say that I wasn't fully concentrated on my job. It was mentally draining to have to endure the sharp pain that traveled up my spine every time I took a step. But regardless, this is my job, and thus I wasn't about to disappoint an entire family who came for the showing. The first home I showed was the one that looked familiar to me on the listing. I realized when I arrived there that it was actually the home of an old friend who used to reside there. I hadn't seen her in a few years, but I did get the news from mutual acquaintances that she had to let the property go into foreclosure. If memory serves, that happened only a few months back. But anyway, because my ankle was hurting so much, I told the family to feel free to look around the gigantic mansion while I stayed in the living room with the client's grandma. It was kind of awkward staring at each other without having to say much. As for the house, it's a good property. It did have some maintenance issues like loose and hanging wires and floors that looked to have been damaged from flood, but they all could be mended quickly, and the price was adjusted as a fixer-upper anyway. One thing that I disliked about the property was the dark, creepy, and depressing energy it gave off. The walls looked recently painted, and under normal circumstances, homes like this should emanate happiness and warmth, but not this one. Maybe the grandma felt the same way since she turned to me and said, "This home needs lots of repairs." And she didn't look happy at all. When the family was done with the showing, they all agreed they didn't like the house. So on to the second house we were, and that's where the grandma opened up to me on how she really felt about the first house. She spoke in a low tone. "I like this home a lot more than the first one. To be frank, the first home gives me the creep." I actually agreed with her, but I had to lift her spirits somehow. I told her that she probably felt that way because the first property is just so much bigger. Personally, I was able to easily ignore the creepiness of the first home. I mean, it's not like I felt a presence lurking around in that place. It was just a negative vibe that I got. I would also add that I was more concerned with the pain in my ankle. Looking back, I think that's probably why the granny felt the full force of the creepiness in the first home, and I didn't. My mind was too preoccupied dealing with the pain. Later on in the evening, I texted the old friend. You know, the old friend who owns the first property. I told her that I had shown her house earlier in the day, and she asked me how the showing went. I told her exactly how it went. I said to her that the family didn't like it and that the grandma was actually creeped out by it. The text which followed my response scared the wits out of me. The text read, "Yes, the home is creepy. My late husband passed away inside that property. You see, I knew her husband was very ill, but I had no clue that he had died in there. No one really mentioned about that important detail. Nonetheless, the old friend, let's just call her Jane for this story, well, Jane called me shortly thereafter and told me the full story of the house. She told me that after her husband passed away, she could still hear him call her name always around 1 in the morning. And this repeated day in, day out, by the way. Jane first thought that she was merely imagining things, but as the days went on, she could no longer pretend that it was all in her head. The nightly calling was scaring the bejesus out of her, and she was feeling unsettled in her own house. The thing is, Jane's husband was bedridden before he passed away. He couldn't walk, but he still managed to move around by crawling to places around the house. After he passed away, Jane swears that she saw her husband crawling around the house. They were just glimpses, but she most definitely believes they were real. Some nights, she could hear him drag his body across the floor. The sound starts on the first floor, then the stairs, and continues onto the hallway on the second floor, to eventually it comes to a stop right in front of Jane's bedroom. After the sound stopped, she never dared to look toward the door, but she says she could feel her husband watching her through the gap at the bottom of the door. If you've ever been to a property that's genuinely haunted, then you'll know exactly how she felt. It's like we have this sixth sense. We know when we are being watched by someone. And at times, it's more than that. I think we have a spiritual connection with the folks who passed away. That's the way it was with Jane. She could actually see what her husband was seeing. So essentially, she was watching herself through the eyes of her late husband. Imagine how freaked out you'd be if you could actually watch yourself in a third-person perspective. So as bad as she felt for her late husband, she started placing towels under the door so to prevent him from watching her in her sleep. In the end, she decided to let the property go into foreclosure. She never disclosed the reason to her son because she knew they would severely damage his psyche. She told me that she could have bought the property outright, but it came to a point that she could no longer stand being connected to the house in any way or manner. She said she had never been that scared in her life. I believed her. It's not every day that you can actually feel someone's fear through a phone call. One of the cons of buying foreclosed properties is that the banks are exempt from disclosing death on the property they have for sale. Unfortunately, it's left up to the buyer to do their own investigation into the history of the house they're looking to purchase. The undermarket pricing of foreclosed homes may be attractive, but oftentimes it's just better to buy a home from a private seller. As things are right now, sellers are required to disclose deaths on their property going back 3 years. Although I should add, haunting and unexplained phenomenon are not part of the disclosure package. Lamentably, you'll have to rely on your sixth sense for this. Good luck shopping out there. I went camping with my girlfriend about 2 years ago. It was my first time camping and the same for my girlfriend Sarah. We were hiking on a popular trail which along the way branches out to several popular campsites. 20 minutes in, we met a couple, Craig and Kimberly. I still remember their names. They were really nice and friendly. So we quickly hit it off as couples and decided to camp close to each other. This was really good for us, because not only were Craig and Kimberly good people, but they were experienced campers as well. Anyway, we got the camp set up, granted with much help from our new friends. We went hiking separately after that, but ended up having dinner together later at night. We talked, drank a little bit of vodka Craig had brought, then hit the sack at around 11 p.m. Sometime later, I was fully asleep when I felt something shaking my shoulder. I opened my eyes and saw that Sarah was awake. I said, "Sarah, what is it, babe?" And as I was saying that, Sarah gestured with her finger for me to be quiet. I was confused for a second or two, but suddenly, the source of Sarah's panic became evident. Someone was humming a song outside. I said to Sarah, but this time quietly, "That's gotta be Craig. He probably finished a bottle of vodka and got himself mad drunk." Then for some reason, I began to laugh uncontrollably. Eventually, I let out a big laugh, but stopped right away when a person outside did the same. He mimicked my laugh, exactly the way I laughed. That startled me at first, but not for long. I told Sarah to stay inside the tent, grabbed the flashlight, then headed outside, even though she was begging for me to stay put. I stepped outside, closed the zipper behind me, then when I turned around, I saw Craig outside of his tent. I flipped on the flashlight and shouted, "Hey Craig," as I laughed my head off at the sight of a man madly intoxicated in the middle of the woods. That laugh, though, didn't last. Craig, for some reason, charged at me at full speed. I felt my body instinctively getting ready for an impact as my shoulders squared up and I held the flashlight in a manner that would make it easier to strike at a target. Thankfully, the situation didn't escalate to violence. As it turned out, Craig had heard the same humming. Hence, he had come out to check on me, thinking that the humming was coming from me. And I had done the same thing, but thinking that it was him. We were facing each other and both of us sort of said the same thing. "That's not you." Then Craig suggested, "I think we should try to find the guy. We can't go back to sleep like this." I told him that I agreed, then we both went back to our tents to tell our girlfriends that we wouldn't venture too far off for the search. Craig was already outside of our tent when I went back out there. That's when we heard someone striking at a tree with something substantial. We soon realized it was an axe hitting a tree trunk. Then I felt Craig grabbing my arm as he said, "Go get your girlfriend and follow us. We're getting the hell out of here." I went back inside the tent, told Sarah to put her jacket and shoes on, then went outside, while understandably, Sarah was in full panic mode. Craig and Kimberly ran toward us and told us to follow them. All of us ran, and not 5 seconds later, we heard trees being chopped off coming from all directions of the forest. All 4 of us were in good shape, so we managed to run all the way to the parking lot. It only took us 12 minutes to get there. From there, we drove to the nearest gas station and called the police. The cops arrived sometime later. We explained to them what had happened, then waited at the police station until morning to go back for our stuffs. At 9 a.m., 2 police officers and a park ranger escorted us back to our campsite. It was a big mess out there. In total, 7 trees were downed, with 2 of them resting on our tent. We also saw some trees nearby that were halfway chopped. I saw the park ranger pointing at the trees and saying something about having to finish off the chopping for safety. Anyway, we grabbed whatever we could, but our tent was completely destroyed. And that was the end of that. The cops had no idea what had happened. They were just as baffled as we were. Sarah and I, we still talk about that night from time to time. I once told her that maybe some local kids were having fun at our expense, but Sarah says if they were kids, they would have considered mission accomplished as soon as we ran off. Her argument is that the kids wouldn't waste their time chopping off all those trees. If they really wanted to destroy our stuff, there are easier ways. Frankly, I can't disagree with that. And you know, whatever the truth may be, I think we did the right thing by getting the heck out of there. We were really lucky to have met Craig and Kimberly. Five years ago, I was 14 years old and still in school. Back then, we had this kid who used to get bullied all the time by the so-called cool kids in school. For this story, I'm going to name the victim of the bullying Anton, and we'll call the bullies the bullies. Anton didn't really fit the mold of the typical bully victim. I think the easiest way of describing him is average. He was average in height, weight, attractiveness, grades, you name it. I was one of the average kids in school, and so I know a thing or two about being average. Generally, we are invisible in school. Boys tend to bully the smallest of the boys, and the girls tend to bully the ugliest girls in school. So it was kinda puzzling how Anton ended up becoming the main plaything of the bullies, seeing as how there were several other easier targets. Having said that, I can't fathom how Anton was able to cope with the bullying throughout the years. I mean, seeing him get beat up was almost a daily event, but that wasn't even the worst of the things he had to endure. During the winter, I saw Anton walk home without a jacket on a couple of occasions. If he wore anything decent, the bullies would always take it from him. I can't for the life of me understand how cruel and inhumane someone has to be to make anyone walk outside without a jacket in the middle of the Russian winter. But the worst, the real worst, happened one day in September. It was after school had ended, and I was right outside the front gate with my best friend. We heard a commotion from nearby and saw a bunch of kids running toward the screams and laughter. I ran toward it as well, and my best friend followed. I had to turn away as soon as I got to the source of the commotion. It was again Anton getting bullied, and this time the bullies had crossed the line. Anton was fully naked on the ground crying. The bullies had his clothes, and they laughed at him as they passed around Anton's pants and jacket. I was going to walk away, but something pulled me back toward Anton. I walked over to him, took off my jacket, then placed it on top of his trembling naked body. I then looked straight in the eyes of the main bully, the kid who always leads the bullying. I told him, "You are a garbage human being and you'll never amount to anything in your life. There will come a day when you remember what you've done today. The day when you get thrown into jail and you get to be made into a plaything of the inmates. You will scream and cry as they have their way with you. You will regret everything, all that you've done in your life." I then pointed at the rest of the bullies and told them, "Each and every one of you will suffer greatly for what you've done today. Mark my words, you will all pay for your sins." I don't know what came over me on that day. I'm not a confrontational person. I get along to get along. I'm that type of a person. Regardless, I snatched Anton's clothes from the hands of the bullies. I then began to help Anton put his clothes back on. Something beautiful happened after that. The other kids, they began to form a wall of jackets around Anton. They took their jackets off, spread them far apart, then turned around to give Anton a private space where he could get dressed. The bullies walked away with their tails between their legs. And the truly great thing is, they stopped bullying Anton after that. The bullies became the enemy of everyone in school. Kids refused to do group projects with any of their members. No one wanted to be associated with them. The bullies were finally getting a taste of their own medicine. Today, 5 years later, Anton is a good friend of mine and is currently attending college in St. Petersburg. As for the bullies, I don't know that I can say that I'm happy of how their lives turned out, but the mumbo-jumbos I spoke on that fateful day came true. 2 of the bullies are currently serving time for a barrage of crimes, including assault and robbery. One of the girls is a druggie, and she asks for change at the corner of a supermarket near the old school. I know that one guy had died in a car accident and another girl who became a prostitute. I'm not so naive to think that every bad person in this world get what they deserve. But at least in our school, justice was served. I've never done anything as brave as defending Anton on that day. That was a single occurrence in my life. Still, it was a good lesson. Sometimes, it takes only one person to make a difference. A good difference in this world. There is one day in my life that has been wiped off completely from my memory. My wife tells me I left home to work on time. My boss tells me I arrived at work 10 minutes early. And my coworkers tell me I left the building with them after work. but I don't remember any of those things. What happened on one day in July 2007, I know them only by the words of those close to me. So here's the rundown of what happened to me after work on that fateful day. Based on my company's CCTV footage acquired by the police, I left the company building at 5:23 p.m. From that point on, the police had put together the CCTV footage from businesses nearby. Me walking toward the subway station is established. After that, I'm seen passing by the bank and approaching a corner deli grocery. That's when a man wearing a hoodie on top of a baseball cap is seen turning the corner. In mere seconds, the man's right in front of me and he can be seen winding his arm while holding a large object in his hand. Next, the man swings his arm, the object in his hand hits my head, then I fall flat on the ground. I'm no longer conscious, but wait, it doesn't stop there. It is now established that the man is holding a crowbar in his hand, and with that crowbar, he strikes my head once more while I'm flat on the ground. The next moment shows him trying to hit me again, but something spooks him and he runs away in the opposite direction. A second later, another man comes into frame and he can be seen calling the police on his cell phone. I woke up at a hospital 5 days later. From fractured skull to brain swelling, everything that could go wrong went wrong inside my head. I needed 3 surgeries to remove all the broken pieces of bones and as well as the fluid buildup. I was blinded for over a week due to the brain swelling. The doctors didn't believe I could recover fully. Over a decade later, I still suffer from the damages done on that day. I'm not the chill, relaxed person that I used to be. I've gotten better over the years, but I'm still not the same man that I was before the incident. I'm often anxious and jittery. I hate that about myself. As for physical traumas, they range from severe headaches to extreme pain around the neck and shoulder region. But I can't look at it all negatively if I want to continue having a life. So on a positive note, I could now walk again normally. Yeah, for a while there, I couldn't balance myself right. Let's see, what else? My vision's near perfect, I still have a job, I have 2 beautiful children, and most of all, I'm still married to the same beautiful, amazing woman that is my wife. Life is good, I really shouldn't complain. To close this off, the man who attacked me was arrested. He's currently serving a 30-year sentence, and I don't believe he'll come out of jail alive. He was 57 years old on the day that he attacked me. I have high hopes that he will rot in his cell until the day he dies. I hope I didn't scare anyone too badly by telling this story. The point of me telling it was to have the opposite effect. I want the people to know that you can overcome just about anything in life. If I can go from coma, blind and crippled to living a fulfilling life again, then so can anyone. For the folks who are suffering out there, please don't lose hope. It's never too late to turn things around. Believe in yourself and those who love you. I know that you can take back control of your life. And I know this for a fact. God bless you and best of luck. The year was 1999 and I was on a highway in my crappy 1985 Buick Century. I was 22 years old at the time and had just began working at an auto repair shop. I was still young and naive. I remember myself being extremely brash and crass at that age. Anyway, it was on a Sunday and I was driving to my buddies to hang out all day. The plan was to play PlayStation all morning. We were really into Tekken 3 at the time. And for the afternoon, we had 2 tickets for the Cubs game. So let's head back onto the road. It was a 3-lane highway and I was on the 2nd lane. I was going to take an exit and so I merged onto the 3rd lane, but without checking the blind spot. You drive like an idiot and idiotic things tend to happen. I almost hit a pickup truck following right behind me. The driver in the pickup truck was obviously furious. He was honking like a madman while flashing the high beams. I should have put my hand up and gestured to say sorry, but of course I didn't. I mean, I did raise my hand, but only to give him the finger. I already told you, I was brash and crass in my early 20s. So anyway, I took the exit shortly thereafter, but trouble followed. As soon as we were on the exit ramp, the pickup truck drove right next to me and rammed me against the concrete barrier on my right. I was dazed for a second, but quickly opened the glove compartment to grab the pen I keep in there and the piece of paper. I was going to jot down the plate number in case the pickup truck decided to make a run for it. Boy, was I wrong. While I was fumbling for the pen and paper, the pickup truck had backed up and was already coming towards me at full speed. It was too late for me to do anything about it. I was a sitting duck in a mid-sized sedan, just waiting to be crumpled by a 5,000-pound monster. The pickup truck hit me with massive force. My car was pushed forward by a car's length and my chest slammed against the steering wheel. Mind you, the steering wheel on the old cars barely have any padding, let alone have airbags in them. If you hit them hard, you're definitely gonna feel it the next morning. At any rate, my engine cut off after the second hit. I tried to start it again, but the piece of junk wouldn't cooperate. Just seconds later, I was rammed again and the impact threw me into the windshield. I definitely felt that one. The pickup truck backed up again, and that's when I knew this guy was actually trying to kill me. So I quickly hopped onto the passenger side seat, then dragged my body out the window and onto the ground that was about 20 feet below me. I didn't care. A broken leg was better than dying. I fell flat on the ground, then heard the pickup truck speeding off to somewhere. The driver probably saw me escape and likely didn't see the point in ramming a car without something to kill inside it. For a minute there, I was afraid that he might try to find me, but it didn't happen. In the end, I came out of the whole thing with only a hyperextension on one knee. The pickup truck driver was arrested 2 days thereafter, and he had to serve a 6 months jail sentence. And yeah, my Buick was totaled. I mean, you could repair it, but why would anyone in the right mind would put in $5,000 on a $500 car? It was a chilling experience, but admittedly, it was a medicine that I needed. I've learned on that day that civility is a very fragile thing in our society. Under the right circumstances, or wrong depending on how you look at it, well, you can drive just about anyone to madness. Take the pickup truck driver for example. The guy wasn't some ex-con or a gang member. He was a plumber. A plumber, for God's sake. The guy was apparently going through an ugly divorce. He had lost a custody battle recently, and the judge supposedly gave him weekly visitation rights to see his children. He was under high stress and needed just a little push to explode. Look, I'm not saying that his actions should be condoned due to the circumstances, but you get my drift. You push a person into a corner and he will snap. I feel bad for the guy. If it wasn't for me, he might have just gone home and cooled down. Maybe he would have done something even more stupid. That's fair. But the odds were just as good that he would have been okay. All that mess and one person's life ruined, at least temporarily, and all of that was thanks to my stupidity. The good that I take from that day is that I haven't gotten a single traffic ticket since that incident. I'm trying to make the point that I no longer drive like an idiot. And I also like to believe that I've become more humble, a better person. I really hope so. I used to live in a small town in Arizona when I was 16 years old. My parents had gotten divorced the year prior, and Mom and I had to move there to start over. At the time, I understood why she had to move, but still, it was a bad deal for me. Think about it. I was 16 years old in a new school. I had no friends, no money, and no father. In a small town of all places. You couldn't draw up a better scenario for a kid to have the worst high school experience ever. As you may imagine, I struggled to make friends and became a loner in time. I used to walk home alone after school. Because for one, Mom barely made enough money to cover the rent and our car. And 2, I had no friends who would drive or walk me home. If you walked to school, the best way to get there was to go right through the town center. The town hall, a small theater, a diner, and about a dozen stores were located in that area. They had plenty more buildings for businesses to occupy, but at the time, the town's economy was in a bad shape. Naturally, I passed by many empty stores on the way to school. Looking back, that was a really depressing walk I had to do every single day. I didn't really think about it at the time, but it was akin to walking through an abandoned town. In any event, I was passing by an empty store that was formerly a clothing store when something spooked the heck out of me. You see, the store was completely empty when I passed it on the way to school, but now there was a mannequin and a couch inside. For the record, the mannequin was positioned in a sitting pose on the couch. Looking through the storefront, I thought it was a person for a second, and that's why I got startled. I stopped in front of the store for some 5 seconds thinking, I guess they're opening a new store here. Good luck. After that day, I continued doing the walk 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Without any friends to speak to and hang out with, I was really lonely. I remember waving at the mannequin every time I passed the store. Then, after a few days, I actually gave it a name and said, "Hi, hello, or how are you?" on my way to and from school. Days had passed. I think it may have been about 10 days after the mannequin had showed up at the store. I saw 2 police cruisers and a white van with some type of a code written on the side parked in front of Benjamin's. Yeah, that's the name I gave the mannequin. At any rate, I crossed the street so I wouldn't bother the police doing their thing and just went home. Mom came home at 10 p.m. after finishing her shift at the diner. I gave her a big hug because she looked so spent. Then she gave me a kiss on the forehead and told me that she had something to tell me. She basically told me that I no longer had to walk to school. She had divided her shift into 2 so she could drop me off at school in the morning, then pick me up after school in the afternoon. I told her I didn't want her to do that. Her schedule was already grueling and I didn't want to make things even harder for her. That's when she explained to me why she was making the changes. The police car and the van after school, they were there to pick up a corpse. Benjamin was not a mannequin. He was a person. Well, used to be. Someone had killed him and used him as a prop for the storefront. You gotta be sick in the head to do something like that. For God's sake, how creepy is it that I said hello to a dead body like it was a living person? But anyway, Benjamin was from out of town. We don't know why or how he was killed, nor how he was brought into town. From what I know, the police didn't even have a suspect and the case went cold after a while. Nothing else happened in town after that. And I mean that literally. Nothing actually happens in that town. Which in some ways was a good thing. I went to school there for 2 years without any trouble. Mom saved enough money to move to somewhere better within that time. Then we were out of there at the first chance we had. I'm not a loner anymore if you are interested. I'm 32 years old today with a kid of my own and a husband who supports me through and through. Unlike my father, Mom's still kicking and enjoying life. She lives in an apartment only 3 blocks away from me. I want her near me and my husband's very understanding of that. And that's it really. Benjamin didn't turn into a ghost and visit me every night. No, I said bye to Benjamin on the day that it was taken, and I hadn't thought about him until recently when I decided to send you my story. It's a little unsettling that the killer was never found, but then Benjamin's killer isn't the only killer at large in this world. Life goes on, it is what it is, I suppose. My story isn't going to make you jump off your seat, but it is something that scared the crap out of me when it happened. So here goes nothing. This was in the early 90s when I worked at an electronic retailer. They used to be called a Wheeze. They went defunct in 2003, and only had stores in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So I doubt many remember or know the store. Anyhow, I was 22 at the time, and like most young people, I didn't have much going for myself. My ride was a Chevy Cavalier. I resided in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, and my closet was full of jeans and cheap t-shirts. A much sought-after bachelor, I was not. So then it was quite the mystery to me that a young and beautiful customer who frequented our store had a thing for me. She would come to the store a couple of times a week, and that went on for about a month. She would always ask for me and used to laugh at the most mundane things I used to say. On the 3rd week, she gave me her number and told me to call her if I ever wanted to hang out. I actually never contacted her. As hard as it may be for anyone to believe that, the reality is I found the whole situation weird. Look at it this way. She used to purchase some expensive stuff at the store, so she's got money. As for me, I was working at the Wheeze. Next, she was quite the looker. Now, the word looker isn't something that I would ever use to describe myself. This is not me feeling bad about myself or anything like that. It's about knowing and accepting the reality. Trust me, that's a good thing. It served me well in my life. But going back to the girl, well, she stopped coming to the store after about a month. I didn't make anything of it until she showed up in the laundromat near my apartment. I was doing my laundry there and she just showed up. She said she was just passing by and that she saw me in there. We talked for about 10 minutes and she gave me her number again before leaving. After that, the coincidences began to mount. I saw her at my church, at a local Radio Shack, at the mall, at the library, and then at my dentist. At my dentist of all places. The coincidences freaked me out for sure, but I wouldn't say that I was scared of the girl at that point. But all of that changed one night when the girl came knocking at my door. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there was the girl, drenched in rain and begging for me to let her in. I pleaded to her to go home. She was creeping me the hell out. That went on for like half an hour until the police had arrived. Apparently, a neighbor had called the cops because she was too loud in the hallway. Anyway, I opened the door when I saw the cops, but before I was able to explain the situation to them, the girl told them that I was her boyfriend. I told the cops that she was lying, but the girl countered by saying that she was pregnant with my baby. That back and forth went on for like 10 minutes before the cops put an end to it. They told the girl to go home for the night and that we, meaning me and her, should meet up at a Burger King or something to discuss the baby situation. Crazy bitch. The girl had no choice but to leave. Seeing her go, wow, it felt like 1,000 pounds had been lifted off my shoulders. That night, I packed up everything and explained the situation to my roommates. I gave them the remaining rent that I owe for the rest of the month and told them that I was moving out, like right away. The apartment wasn't under my name, so I just had to pack up and leave. That's what I did. I stayed at my best friend's for a while and quit my job at the Wheeze over the phone. The manager was not happy, but he knew about the girl and he saw her flirting with me with his own eyes, so he understood my situation. In the end, I went back home to Virginia and never saw the girl again. It was a mystery to me back then and is still a mystery today. Why the girl wanted me so badly? I don't know and I don't care to know. All I know is that she still scares the living daylights out of me. I hope I never see her again. Stalkers are freaking scary. Hey guys, Dennis here. So it took me a while to post a new video, but I took my time because I wanted to upload one long video rather than 3 or 4 short ones. I mean, you guys enjoy the longer videos better, so why not? But anyway, I'm here to apologize for the crappy audio quality of the recent videos. I noticed that the narrations had sounded worse and worse by every episode I was making. As it turns out, there was a problem with the preamp. For those of you unfamiliar with audio gears, preamp is basically what prepares the signal to be processed by mixers and recording devices. So it has a direct impact on how well a microphone sounds when recorded. Having said that, the problem has been remedied. I bought a new preamp and I'm actually doing this outro with the new gear. I only had time to re-narrate a couple of stories, so some stories in this video sound better than others. I do apologize for that. Changing topic, and on a personal note, my allergy is really bad this year. You guys are going to notice that when you listen to me narrate, so I'm going to have to apologize in advance. It'll be pretty bad until the end of summer and there's nothing that I can do about it. Also, I actually had to work last week and this week as well. I had 3 days off and that was it. Something came up at work and I had to deal with that. Imagine if I had planned a trip to Hawaii or something, thinking that I'd be off for the next 2 weeks. Jesus, that would have been a disaster. But you know, that's my life right now. I work far fewer hours than before, but business trips are abound and often long. So if you think about it, since I don't get to go home when I'm on business trips, it's almost like working 24 hours a day when I'm out of state. But I'm not complaining. We all gotta work our butts off to not only make a living, but also to prepare for that ideal retirement one day. Work hard, save your money, and enjoy your 60s and 70s with beautiful 20-something babes. I'm only kidding, I really am. I'm extremely happy as a single man right now, and I really don't see myself ever getting into another serious relationship. I'm that serious about that. I've been single for like the past 3 years now, and I've gotten so comfortable with that. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's just the way I am right now. I never thought that I would say that. Okay, I gotta finish up this outro so I could go out and change the brake pads on my truck, get my hands dirty for a couple of hours, then I get to save a couple $100. Not a bad deal if you ask me. I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye for now.